Hey y'all, it's been a while since I've been on YouTube. I had some conferences this spring, but I'm excited to get back and making videos. I got a new course coming up, so I'll talk about that at the end. But today I want to show you how to make a recursive React component. And to do that, we are going to be looking at this demo right here. We're going to learn how to build this with a single React component. And if you've never seen recursive React components before, they're very cool. I think you're going to learn a thing or two. So let's go ahead and get started right over here with a blank slate. And I'm starting here with just some static markup and a folder icon, and we're displaying just this home folder right now. So let's say we have some more folders under home. Right now we can see we're rendering home inside of an unordered list. We have a list item here. So right after this span, let's add a new unordered list, and we'll say movies, music, and pictures. Okay, that's a good start. Let's grab this folder icon and let's just drop it right here. And these are just stacking on top of each other. It looks like up here for our home, we wrap this in a span with flex to flatten these out. So let's do the same thing. We'll come up here and grab these three, drop in a span, and then we'll go to the end here, 1, 2, 3, and drop in the closing span. And that flex item center lays that out nicely. So that's looking pretty good, but we want to push these over a little bit since they're nested inside of home. So this is home, here's our list. Let's just add some padding left, maybe 6. That looks good. And these are also a little tight. Looks like we have a little bit of margin Y on each one of these line items. So let's go ahead and grab these and add it just like that. And okay, we're off to a good start here. We've got our home folder, movies, music, and pictures. But there's a lot of duplication going on here in our template. So let's go ahead and pull these folders out into a little data structure here. And we'll just call this folders. And this will just be an array. Movies, music, and pictures. And right here, we should be able to get rid of these two. And let's go ahead and folders.map each folder. And we'll go ahead and key this by the folder. And we'll change this static string right here, movies, with the folder name. So this is pretty cool. We can come here and add documents. And now we have a little data-driven tree right here. But of course, we want to go one level deeper. Folders can have folders inside of them. So maybe inside of movies, we'll have action movies and comedy movies. And so we want to add that to our data structure. Instead of just strings, let's go ahead and make these some objects so we can add a little bit more structure here. And we'll give them a name. And we will go ahead and close this. Let's fix this key right here. This is going to be folder.name, and the label will be folder.name. And let's go ahead and come to movies, and we'll add some nested folders. And we'll give this a folder name of action. And we'll also add another folder called comedy. So pretty simple little data structure here. And this looks good, except we don't see action and comedy under movies. So let's come down here, right where we're rendering our folders, and let's add some nested folders. So we're gonna do the same thing as before, right outside the span. We'll just grab a new unordered list, come here, and right here, if this folder has folders of its own, then we just wanna map over these. And what do we wanna render? Well, we're in an unordered list. We wanna grab the list item and the span, just like before. So we'll paste this in, close out the li, and check this out. We've got action and comedy rendering right under movies. And if we were to come up here to music, we could add nested folders for rock and for classical. So pretty cool. Our data-driven UI still seems to be working, but I know what you're thinking. We have to go one level deeper. What if I wanted to come here to our actions movie and add another level of nesting? And this one's going to be, let's say, under action movies. We're going to give this something like the 2000s. And then we'll do another one for the 2010s. But if we save this, we don't see this under action. So we could come down here and duplicate all of this again and put it inside here. But this is getting pretty repetitive. So why don't we pull out a component and we'll call it a folder, and that way we can reuse some of this logic here. So I'm going to come here and create a folder component. And let's just find all of this markup right here. This is really the folder itself, the li item. And what does a folder need? Well, it needs a folder. So let's just replace this with folder, and we'll pass that in. And we can also key it by the name, just like before. And let's close that bracket. Okay, looks good so far. We still don't see our new categories 2000s and 2010s for action. And that's because we aren't rendering any nested folders right here. So this guy is rendering nested folders. Let's just grab the same markup right here that it's using, and we'll drop it right here. And check that out. Our 2000s and 2010s show up. And let's come here and add some folders to comedy. That seems to be working. And under 2000s here in action, let's add another nested folder, and we'll call this popular. And check this out. We have another layer of nesting right here. And if we look down, we didn't add anything. And you might have missed it because it happened pretty quick. But when we copied over this list into here, check this out. This folder component is rendering itself. And this is what a recursive component is. Our folder component takes in a folder and it shows the name with the icon. And then if it has any nested folders, it maps over them and renders another folder for each one. And that's where the recursion is. It comes back and starts over, and it keeps going as far as your data structure does. Let's come back here and refactor the rest of this to use this now. Right here, we're mapping over folders, and now we have all of this in a component. So let's just change all of this with a folder. And we'll key this. And it still works. If I comment this out, we can see it all goes away. Pretty cool. We can see all the repetition is inside. The only thing left is this home kind of root folder, which is kind of part of our static markup. So let's bring this into our data structure. We'll come up here to folders, and we'll add a root of home, and we'll give this a folders array, and we can just move all of these right inside. So now we see home duplicated. Let's go ahead and delete that. We can get rid of this and this. And now everything seems to be working great. So let's zoom out and just take a look here really quick. This is pretty amazing. We have this little, what is this, a 15-line component? And it is controlling the rendering for every single folder you see right here. Just a single simple component that is rendering an arbitrary data structure of arbitrary depth. And this is the power of recursion. It works particularly well for any sort of tree-like data structure. A lot of times you'll see this called a tree node, something like a file system with directories and files, or even a React tree follows this pattern. But you can see here, I can just comment these out, and everything's going to work just fine. And I can comment this out, and I could even grab these folders and put them under documents, something like that, and we'll see them move. And all of this is happening with just this single 15-line component. So again, if you've never seen recursion before, I think this is a pretty cool example. It's pretty mind-bending when you first see it. You may have encountered it in programming outside of React because it works with normal function calls in any programming language. And in fact, components are functions, so it kind of makes sense that it works with React. But I just love kind of how elegant this is, how simple this is. And we can see right here, we're basically off to the races with our file system here. Okay, let's move these folders back into movies. And I'll just collapse this for now. And let's come take a look at these TypeScript errors. So it looks like we don't have a type right here. Let's go ahead and add a type for our folder. And what is a folder? Well, a folder has a name that's a string, and a folder that's an array of folders. So we could say name is string, and then folders is an array of folders, which we need to define again. And you can see this is going to get hard pretty quick because this can go arbitrarily deep. So usually with recursion, you're going to need to define your own type right out here. Let's call this folder, name string. And what is folders? Well, it's an array of folders. So we even see some recursion going on with the type definition, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and come back. And now we can just say folder is a folder. And if we look here, this fixes our component. We have one error right here. And this is saying folders is missing because the type of our actual data here from our kind of root folders object is just being inferred from this. But really this is an array of folders. So let's just go ahead and give this variable a type, which is folder array. And we can move this data structure outside of the component actually, because this is just static data for this demo. And if we expand this, we see we have some errors with our data. It says property folders is missing, and that's because folder requires folders. But right now, some of these don't have any subfolders. Let's just make this property optional. And our data looks good, and our code looks good. So now we have autocomplete everywhere, and we're sure our code is covering all possible code paths. Okay, our file tree is looking good, but file systems don't only have folders, they have files too. So let's add some files to our data structure. I'm going to come up here and let's just delete this popular folder for now. And let's come down here and add a file, which we'll call passwords.txt. And here we can see it in our file system, but it has a folder icon. We want to change this. We want to show a document icon because this is a file. But how can we differentiate this from a folder that doesn't have any subfolders? Well, we could add type or something like that, but we already have this optional folders property. So why don't we just add folders to each folder? And if it's empty, we'll just leave it empty. And that way we'll be able to differentiate between these. So let's go ahead and add folders like this. Here, here, and let's look right here, and right here. So now all of our folders have the folders key, which means a file like this, we should be able to change our icon from a folder to a directory based on whether this folder prop has a folders key. So if it has a folders key, we'll stick with that. Otherwise, we will render a document icon. And we'll grab these classes right here. And check that out. We got our document. Let's go ahead and make this something like gray 900. And this is pretty cool. We can come up here to our 2000s action movies, and we can add gladiator.mp4. Should show up as a file right there. And we can add another one, American Beauty.mp4. Pretty amazing here, just to be able to handle kind of this complex arbitrary data structure still with a single component. This is looking awesome, but we're missing one feature that you may have remembered from the beginning, and that is the ability to collapse these. So let's bring in a little chevron icon and add that. And the first thing I'm going to do is add that right here before the icon. So chevron right icon. Let's use the 16 size. So we'll make this size 4. And maybe text gray 500. And there we go. We have our little collapse icon. And when we click this, we want to toggle everything under just this folder. So we need some new state to track whether this folder is open or this folder is open. So it seems like a good place to put that would be right inside of our folder component. So let's use state. We'll call this is open, and we'll default this to false. And where should we use this? Well, if the home is closed, we don't want to render any of its subfolders, right? And those are rendered right here. So let's just wrap this in an is open check. And there we can see everything closes. If I come back up and default this to true, we'll see it all opens. But let's start off as false. And we have our little icon right here to the left of this. Let's go ahead and wrap this in a button, and we'll say on click. Let's just set is open to the opposite of is open. And now when I click home and movies and action and comedy, check this out. I can click each one of these, open and close, and because the state is tied to each folder, we are already done. We already have all of our nesting, opening, and closing. I mean, how cool is this? If we actually just open up the React Dev Tools right here, we'll get a cool little look at what's happening. We have all of our folder components, right? And if I just look and find one of these, try to select this right here, there we see a folder, key home, folder key action, and folder key movies. So we can see we are rendering a separate folder instance for each folder in our data structure. And so we basically have all these instances of the folder component already just by the nature of recursion. And this is something that usually falls out of the design of your code when you use recursion. It usually just ends up being very elegant and easy to work with. But we already have a folder component for each one of these. It's a very natural place to put the state. We didn't have to do much at all here to get a lot of really cool behavior. It's surprising just how straightforward this is. So this is pretty awesome. Let's go ahead and make this little chevron icon right here when we're open. Let's just make it rotate down a little bit. So I'm just going to make this an expression. And we'll say if we're open, we'll rotate this 90. And now look at this. We've got open, open, open. Pretty cool. Now we're rendering the chevron by files. So let's go ahead and only render this button here if our folder is actually a folder. So if it has a folders key, then we'll go ahead and render that button. And that moves these files back over. Now we need to account for that space. So let's come to our document icon. Let's just add a little bit of margin left, not 5, not 6. I think that's a little bit too much. 6 is 24. I think this is 22 pixels here because of this 1.5 gap. But now we've got these lining up just perfectly. And we also are rendering this even for folders that are empty. So let's also go ahead and say only for folders and folders that are non-empty. So let's say the length here has got to be greater than 0. There we go. We see our empty folders moved over. Let's go ahead and add that same class right here. We'll make this dynamic. And if folder.folders.length is 0, we will go ahead and slide this left by 22 pixels. So now we've got our complete structure. We can see an empty folder, we can see a file, and we can navigate down. This is pretty awesome. Always satisfying to build this sort of thing. You can imagine adding all sorts of cool stuff here, animation, selection. Before we go, just to point out, now that we do have folders and files inside of this data structure, this is no longer really an array of folders, is it? So let's refactor this, name this something a little bit better. And I want to point this out just because if you do come across recursion in your work, which is not useful only for file trees, but for any data structure that has a tree-like structure to it, often you'll hear each part of the structure called a node. So typically we would name this something like the node type. This is just like a node. It's a point in a graph or a tree in this case. And that means we want to rename this folders to kind of something more generic, maybe nodes right here. And now we can see this looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and rename this to nodes. And we'll just clean this up while we're here. That's a node, that's a node. And our folder, this is really like our UI component right here. It's what's rendering the UI, but it's not just rendering a folder, it could be rendering a file as well. So let's just rename this to something like file system item. And this will take in a node. I like keeping this a little bit more generic on the data structure side, but the actual React component, this is pretty descriptive of what it's actually rendering. So with that, that looks pretty good. Let's refresh and take a look. Still have a single component right here, no duplication, And it's even stateful. Again, you can imagine all sorts of cool stuff to do with this, but we are able to render anything we want here. We could even come up and add one of the best comedy movies of the 2000s, Superbad, and we should see this right under here. So, pretty fun little demo. If you've never seen Recursion before, I hope you learned a thing or two. And like I said, I know I haven't been on YouTube in a while, but I'm excited to get back into it because we are starting planning for our new course over on Build UI. It's actually going to be a bunch of cool stuff like this. It's called Advanced React Component Patterns, and we're going to be talking about things like recursion and render props, controlled components and uncontrolled components, and when you want to use each one. We're going to build a cool drag and drop sortable thing with framer motion. It's going to be fun. So if you're interested in that, I have a link up to a little email sign up so you can just stay updated with that, but expect to see me back here soon. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and thanks for watching.